It's The World This Week, 7 days, 4 Paris-based correspondents, 1 hour. The World This Week in partnership with the Daily Beast. Foreign editor Christopher Dickey is with us. How are you, sir?
Always glad to be here.
Always glad to have you. Always glad to welcome Luke Baker, Paris bureau chief for the Reuters news agency.
Thanks for having me back.
Welcome back. Elena Gabrielon, a journalist at the Russian language service of Radio France International, our sister station.
Good evening.
Nice to see you. And Georg Blume, Paris correspondent for German weekly Die Zeit. How are you?
Thank you. I'm well.
The World This Week on Facebook and Twitter, the hashtag World This Week. In case you hadn't heard, there's an Olympic truce on. 2 Koreans, one from the north, one from the south, running hand in hand up the stairs to light the flame. The Winter Games in Pyeongchang opening with a celebration of a rare thaw in tension on the peninsula. Earlier, there was a lunch where South Korean President Moon Jae-in welcomed the older sister of Pyongyang's leader, Kim Yo-jong, the first member of the North's ruling dynasty to venture south since the Korean War, part of the highest level delegation ever to cross the border. I know it's an ellipse, it's only a fortnight, but does it matter?
Oh, I think it does matter. I mean, people are saying, oh, well, this will all blow over, all this peace talk. But in fact, Moon Jae-in is, I won't say he's pro-North Korean, but he is very pro-peace, pro-dialogue, pro-diplomacy, and very hostile to the idea of really strong military pressure on North Korea. Whereas you have the Americans who are saying, well, we've got to put maximum pressure on North Korea because the American objective is to get the North Koreans to get rid of their nuclear arsenal and missiles completely. That's not going to happen. So you have a very awkward situation where you have this message being brought by Mike Pence, the American vice president.
Who's sitting a few seats away.
Sitting a few seats away and being really tough and stern and square-jawed. And meanwhile, you have Moon Jae-in shaking hands with Kim Jong-un's sister and shaking hands with the president of North Korea and making it all look like kumbaya and everything's okay.
Well, yeah, I think the wild card in all this is, as always, is Trump, though, isn't it? I mean, if he starts tweeting right after the Olympics or even during the Olympics, saying, you know, I'm not happy with what's going on in the Korean Peninsula, and we're going to put pressure on North Koreans again.
Which is what Mike Pence said in Tokyo on the previous leg of his trip.
Right. So that risk is always there. And I think it becomes, even when the Olympics have had a tremendous track record of trying to bring nations together, and their symbolism was very important today, and it was quite impressive. But that can be unraveled quite easily these days by some...
Yeah, but the problem is he doesn't need to put pressure only on the North Koreans. He has to put pressure on the South Koreans. And when he does that, he does it very clumsily and often pushes the South Koreans even more into the peace camp, even more into let's figure out how to reconcile with Kim Jong-un camp, which is the last thing he wants.
I think we should for one moment stop talking about North Korea and America, really look at South Korea for the wonderful chance and they have right now to present democracy to the world. And we have just had, 2 years ago, a great political crisis in South Korea, and they're back. They have a new president. He's giving a great image of them to the world. And actually, it's what happened also in the Summer Olympics in 1988, just a few months before South Korea was almost in shambles, the demonstrations going.
Student demonstrations.
Exactly.
At the time. Yeah.
And then in the Olympics, it was peace and democracy. And when we think about the World Cup, which took place in South Korea in 2002, just a year before they were in a deep economic crisis, they hadn't paid back their high debts to the International Monetary Fund. And then in 2002, they had just a great time. And Kim Dae-jung, the Nobel Peace Prize winner, was president. And again, South Korea gave us a great image of democracy to the world. And that's, I think, really what's happening today. Congratulations to South Korea.
But both the 1988 Summer Olympics and the World Cup in 2002 were followed by a spike in tension with the North.
Absolutely. But through all this, South Korean democracy kept vibrant, kept alive, and was able to renew itself.
And through all of that, the North Koreans did not have nuclear weapons and missiles capable of reaching the United States. That's major change in the situation.
Yes, of
Yeah,
course.
right. So critics are saying the pun of preference for South Korean nationalists is that the Pyeongchang Games have become the Pyongyang Games. French daily newspaper Libération this Friday with this photo on its front page with the headline, Master of Ceremonies. Elena Gabrielon, your reaction.
Well, actually, I think that it is a little bit true in terms of the mediatization that we have and how we are focused on the personality of his sisters, first of all. She's 30 years old. She's very young. She's also treated by South Korean media like South Korean Ivanka, so somebody who has a very strong influence on North Korean leader, as Trump's daughter has on the American president. And of course, her presence on this Olympic Games is something very strong, first of all. The second reason is also the presence of these 22 athletes who are participating in this parade under the same flag of United Korea, which is absolutely unbelievable. At the same time, I'm quite surprised by the normality of the presence of North Korean delegation and athletes, because just the day before we had this huge military parade organized by North Korean leaders, and normally it is organized in April, but they decided to move it up. So it is, of course, a clear political message. And I think that they want to show, in one hand, we show our muscles. On the other, we are internationally accepted on some high level international competition.
I think the symbolism is great, and it's impressive, and it's warm, and it makes us feel good around the Olympics. But frankly, if we think this is suddenly going to lead to some de-escalation of the nuclear threat that exists from the Korean Peninsula, I think we've got to wake ourselves up, you know. The sanctions are still going to be coming from the United States. The pressure is still there. The realpolitik threat is still there.
Well, what happens when Moon Jae-in goes to Pyongyang, where there are lots of rumors that he's being invited to Pyongyang? If he goes there, that's also going to tremendously undermine the effort by the United States to isolate North Korea.
I think,
we don't know how the
nevertheless,
Americans will
I talked
react.
to friends in Seoul this week, and they were all, in a way, happy at least that even though, of course, the threat from the north hasn't become less, it seems like they are back into the picture. Their government is now back, in the deal, like before the last years.
President Moon is still popular, but he's lost some of that popularity.
Yes, 10%. No, but that after 1
That
year,
unified women's ice hockey team the Lena was talking about most notably, not everybody agrees with, especially young people.
Especially the American coach of the team who wants her players to
win.
But I think they are happy that South Korea is part of the negotiations again, and that it's not just the big powers, China, Japan, America, and who are dealing with North Korea, and it gives them a feeling of empowerment.
It does, but Luke's exactly right. The wild card in this is Trump. If he starts to feel that the diplomacy is taking the initiative away from the United States and its efforts to end the North Korean threat, then he could be very dangerous.
All right, but enough talk of Donald Trump. Let's talk about Vladimir Putin instead. Before the torch had even been
Is there a
lit,
difference?
Russia suffered a huge setback. In the end, the Court of Arbitration for Sport upholding a ban for 45 Russian athletes from 45 of those Russian athletes after the IOC had banned the Russian flag during the games. This over state-sponsored doping uncovered after the last games in Sochi. Among those excluded, Korean-born six-time short track gold medalist Victor An and cross-country skiing gold medalist Alexander Legkov. His absence openly cheered by many competitors. As for the Russians, well, they're unabashed in expressing their displeasure.
Double standards are unacceptable. We abide by laws, and when these laws are being broken, we have to react. And the reaction should be harsh and resolute.
I would like to remind you of a recent statement by President Vladimir Putin in which he instructed the government to prepare alternative games for the athletes who, for known reasons, could not participate in the Olympic Games. The president also mentioned financial awards comparable to those at the Olympic Games.
Elena Gabriel, what kind of ratings can we expect for those alternative games the Russians want to organize?
Well, I even can't imagine how it would be organized, and the athletes would be.
Is he serious, Dmitry Peskov, when he says that?
Just maybe to not make athletes be very disappointed not being in South Korea, but at the same time, they will hold their life. They are working on this very moment to participate in Olympic Games. So making them participate in some alternative games, it is something, it seems to me, not very serious. But what we see really in Russia, it is the spirit of the Cold War, which is contrasting completely what we have in South Korea, North Korea, with this kind of warm climate, let's say, at the first point of yes. But in Russia, we are talking about discrimination of the athletes, that they are bad treated by Canadians and Americans, that they should stick up all the symbols of state like flags and not have their anthem. And finally, they decided to launch a campaign to show that let's recognize us with athletes participating from Russia because they don't have the right to use the Russian flag. So it is quite humiliating from Russian athletes.
Because I've read that Russia's going to host the World Cup this coming summer, and Russia likes football, but it loves winter sports. Is this a bigger deal? The
sure.
Winter
That's
Olympics.
why we are talking really a lot in Russian media that something is humiliating. It is a political campaign against Russia. Among these 45 athletes, you have also this clean athletes who it's injustice that they don't participate. So that is how it is presented in Russian media. And of course, such kind of declarations like we'll organize an alternative games, they will be financially compensated. So that is just to show that we are supporting our athletes, and it is the most important. But I would like also to say that you have 170 athletes who still participate, which is the biggest, nearly one of the biggest teams in this Olympic Games.
And they would have been supporting their athletes better if they hadn't been drugging them.
Right. I mean, that's the thing, right? This clearly shows that it's hurting Putin a lot, right? And I think he worries about his ratings and his, the very fact that he's going to offer his alternative games with the same prize money. I mean, it really is a pretty naked pitch for some, stick with me because I'll back you up. But I think the message really is that patriotism that has become pretty obsessive in Russia. The most popular movie right now is some movie about the Russian basketball team beating the Americans at the Olympics. So the opportunity to be represented by, under the Russian flag, a Russian banner at the Olympics and win has been denied them. And I think actually that's something that those that want to pressure Russia need to think about clearly, because I think it has some impact and is working.
Sure, and this is coming, 4 years after the Sochi Games too,
right?
Which were the big Russian extravaganza. And of course, that was the problem. So many athletes had to win at Sochi because, you give them whatever it takes.
Whatever it takes, right?
By the way, Georg Blume.
The big fear is that the World Cup in Russia will again be a humiliation for Russia. And as a German, when Russia gets humiliated, you don't feel good.
But that's after the presidential election, which is scheduled for March.
If that will really cheer up the people, I mean, maybe at least Russia goes through the quarterfinals, or we'll have to hope for that.
Georg Blume, a final question about, because we've been talking this whole part of the show about sports and politics mixing, right? People really watch the medals table, and with the case of the Russians not being able to have your country on the medals table is a big deal. Through the years, I saw a chart this Friday, Germany with the most medals. How big a deal? Is it something you look at, the medals table?
Yes, you always do look at the medals table. You don't miss that, yeah. But of course, we have that memory with East Germany, who were, for years and years, they were sometimes even better on the medals table than we were from West Germany, and we learned later that was all fake in a way, and all about drugs and nothing else. And we know about the fate of our East German athletes who, suffered long time from their spoiled life in a way. So
and the effect of the drugs.
Yeah, exactly. That's the health problems, and so even everybody is attracted by these medals table. It's everything reasonable tells us not to look at them so closely. Yeah.
Well, of course you look. I mean, it's like who wins and who loses.
Right.
I mean,
and
if you don't keep track of that, the most untrue words ever spoken were, it's not whether you win or lose, it's how you play the game. Oh, no.
Luc Bélier, you'll be listing out for God Save the Queen?
Well, what chances do we have? I mean, Eddie the Eagle, No, apparently we have someone. I think a good, I don't know. Yeah, monoskier or something. Yeah, we'll see. But I mean, no. I mean, when the Summer Olympics, Britain, when it held the Olympics, it was obsessive about the medals table, and getting ahead of China, I think it was, or sort of inching to the top of the table. Okay, clearly doesn't happen for Britain in the Winter Olympics, but for Russia, as you said, I mean, being up there and not having your name there because they're all unaligned, non-aligned athletes.
And having the
painful.
great codes, you have 170 athletes not in this colorful, symbolic colors of Russia. It is something also humiliating, not only excluding these 45 athletes,
I don't
but
know
also
the
having
answer
neutral
to this,
status.
But what music do they play if they win?
Play the Olympic anthem.
Exactly. Yes, because they have the Olympic flag also, not Russian flag.
Right.
Of course, the NHL is staying away. Russia with a good chance at hearing that Olympic anthem in ice hockey, in men's ice hockey. We'll see it. We'll see how that plays out. When we come back, we're going to see that it's been an up and then down week for the leader of Germany's opposition. We'll tell you why and why it could impact much more than Germany, Martin Schulz's mixed fates. Stay with us. You're watching The World This Week.